So, which one do I talk in, right? It's like, hello, people. So does this thing doing anything? Okay, good. That's better. That's so much better, actually. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. Where do I begin? I guess I'll just talk about this painting in particular, because inevitably in talking about this painting, it relates to my practice at large. That's that new popular institutional label for the thing that we used to call a studio. Although, and I'll talk about this too, my practice is not limited to the studio, and I'm very interested in that. So I do have to call it a practice. So I do have to embrace the kind of postmod mentality around how an artist functions in our society today. So, and actually the narrative behind this painting plays a lot into that, because it's a history that, so I'll try and tell you as much of the backstory as possible, and then hopefully you won't be bored. And at some point, maybe I'll sing a little bit, and that'll get you through. Okay, so this piece comes out of a series of pieces that I did, believe it or not, out of cinematic sources. I was basically born and raised with a TV in my face, and a love relationship with movies of the grand Hollywood era, and then on into the history of European cinema. And then back into the avant-garde and the Eisensteinians and all their montage and the way the sort of cinematic influence on painting and cubism and time operations and things of that ilk. And so I was appropriating cinema, if you could call it that, but I actually have another term for it, which is called, I was covering cinema. So I was living out cinematic scenes in singular painting sessions. So whether it was a frame from a Rainier Fassbinder film or Mildred Pierce, which is a big go-to to me when I'm feeling depressed. I would go to those cinematic moments and sort of relive those scenes and understand sort of where the terrain where I came from and the terrain where I was probably not going to go except imaginatively. And through that process of appropriation, I started developing what was a drawing, collage, and video process that I had been working on ever since I was a student at the Art Institute, which is I used to work in the painting studios, and then I would go over to the video studios and edit away. And in fact, there's a man sitting in here whose work I documented in 1990, was it, Warren? 91? I documented his show at the Kemper Gallery when it was in the basement of the Art Institute. And so I was very techie that way, and I was really interested in the idea of getting the world that I was experiencing in my home life, in my suburban existence, in my personal life, into the paintings. Now this is the inverse of that in a way, but all of that explains why I gave myself a set of permissions to directly riff on a Claude Lorraine painting. So this is a Claude Lorraine painting riff of a Greek scene, with a little Boucher architectural instance, and then some other things which I'll get into, which are a memory recall from a personal experience. But so through these cinematic paintings, which I can't show you, so you have to imagine rendering my mother as Liz Taylor coming up a stairway in Cat in a Hot Tin Roof. So my experiences of watching those films with my mother and experiencing the modern narrative as a woman. Oh my God, hi Anne. A modern narrative of, you look so cute. A modern narrative of the sort of the woman coming out of the sort of peasantry wife role into the women as entrepreneur. And then, of course, all the perversions that ensue therein were deeply important to me in forming my relationship to the canon of painting as a woman. So, and which I know that seems like a leap, but actually it's really not, even just being a business person and thinking about what Joan Crawford was doing in that role as an entrepreneur was very similar to the struggles that women are still having in terms of occupying the space of the canon of painting today. So a little bit less, but obviously it's still happening. And certainly the larger canon is still catching up with the importance of women artists over the last century. So, so that being said, I needed those roles to actually engage in what would be the manipulation of paint and the manipulation of the canon for reasons that were at all applicable to my experience and what I cared about. So that all started happening way after grad school. What was that? I guess I started painting from cinema in I'd say the mid-2000s. And it was like a feeding frenzy. I made hundreds of paintings. And I suddenly realized that I was born from this place of having worked from here, having worked with Wendy Geller, who was a video professor here, and Warren and Lester and all these people who were amazing painting teachers, and combining what would be a pictures generation mentality of appropriation with the kind of formal and technical aspects of modernist painting, which was the education that I was given here, and trying to calibrate all that for my own purposes. So that was my necessity for conversing with those early childhood like cinematic experiences. And as I went on, I wasn't repeating myself, but I sort of got a wanderlust. I started to realize that if I could be occupying or cover, so I use the word cover a lot. Now I'll explain that. Cover is, and I like to use the example of Tina Turner, but since we're talking about high Hollywood, I'll talk about Judy Garland. Because why wouldn't I talk about Judy Garland, right? And in fact, I've done a video of Judy Garland singing The Man That Got Away, and I could do the whole thing right now for karaoke. Like, the night is bitter, the stars have lost their glitter, right? And actually there's a mimicry to that I'm very interested in that goes back to my interest in pre-modern painting. And so I'm interested in conventional grisaille techniques of mimicry and all this, and trying to fold that into contemporary painting practice. And of course I adopted, Judy Garland as my my meta mother, since meta's the new coin term, or the old coin, because I actually heard it in a recording from the 50s, and I thought, oh, it's not that new, recently. But so I made a video of myself performing The Man That Got Away in about 15 different locations, including on my lawnmower, and like naked flipping crepes in my kitchen, and digging a hole in my yard, and fly fishing, which is a habit I have. I wouldn't say it's a hobby, it's actually an addiction and a habit. So I was thinking about like how I was appropriating songs like this. And another example of that in my video practice was I learned every instrument from Like a Rolling Stone. So I learned the drums, and I filled out the drum rolls with extra rolls to sort of deal with the complications of the complexity of the piano part in that song. And then I learned the guitar, and then I learned the bass. And I played it live with each instrument from beginning to end, and then collaged it into like what would be considered a really bad high school garage band cover of Like a Rolling Stone. And I did it because I really like Greil Marcus, and I don't know if anybody's read any of Greil Marcus's criticism or text, but I've had a long-standing love affair with Lipstick Traces, and at some point he came out with a review on the Bob Dylan biography, and he was like a Rolling Stone is not just the best song that was ever written, it's the best song that ever could be written. And I was like, okay, well, and not only that, but he excluded 30 verses or something. So I thought, well, I have got to intervene with that as a woman, but hey, nice you're coming in. And so, oh my God. So to intervene and to subvert the song, but not to literally subvert the song, but in fact to find what would be considered an unexpected point of connection and pleasure that I found with the song that was not necessarily the permissible entry into that as a cultural production. So I was through reliving that song and from the cellular level up, I don't even know who that guy is. Maybe I do. I was trying to have a genuine experience with this very important cultural object or whatever. So not to appropriate it and sort of circumvent its power, but rather to find another manifestation of its power. So that being said, then I realized that I could do that with the history of painting, and I wasn't so interested in the conventions of abstraction, and I was doing a lot of research into the Enlightenment, and the way that, of course, the Enlightenment segued into modernism anyway. So I thought I'd go to the evil step-parent of modernism and hash out what existed there in terms of philosophy and in terms of just the kind of the way that these binaries play out. So the binaries of reason versus mysticism. So the spiritual Renaissance versus the reasonable Enlightenment, and then of course all of the mechanization and rationalization that Enlightenment projected onto us as human beings. And so I got really interested in that. I thought about that, I read about it, and then I thought, okay, I'm gonna cover some Diderot encyclopedia illustrations. And without any thought, like, oh, I'm going to make this, you know, funny or sad or happy or assaulting to the senses, but just to try to reconnect. And so through that then came my interest in actually dealing with covers just the way Judy Garland would do The Man That Got Away, or Tina Turner would do Proud Mary. I would do that with Claude Lorraine and Boucher. So that's how I got to this painting, but there's one more layer to that, which is that in 2009 I had just finished a series of, oh thank God, people. In 2009 I had two solo shows in New York, and they were a series of paintings that were based on individuals that came to me and said, I want to pose in your cinematic paintings. And so they were kind of the boss to me. So for instance, Lisa Sanditz and Tim Davis, who they're in the collection over there at the Kemper. In fact, I finally got to see that Lisa Sanditz subterranean painting of Kansas City, which is terrific. They wanted to be Sissy Spacek and Martin Sheen in Badlands, naturally. So I orchestrated that painting, and that painting was actually on this scale. And it was a painting that was done in one session, which, P.S., is what this painting was done in. So it was not a painting that was worked over months and times and whatever. It was a single session. Now, when I say single session, it's particular, because I'm allow myself to work on this particular series. I allow myself to work on these pieces until the medium solidified. So until viscosity turned crystalline. So when the medium was still wet, I could work on it. Once it dried, I had to step out of the painting. So I had a very limited time period to do this in. So, but the other aspect of it, which I was getting to in some superfluous way, was that these figures were just basically, as I looked at the Lorraine landscape and some figures in the foreground of the Boucher, I started making marks. And the year before that, after I'd done the series of cinematic portraits in 2009, I went on a really long trip to Asia, and we went to India and Bali. And this was basically, as I started marking up the figures in the Lorraine painting, just like doing exploratory marks with my brush, I suddenly realized I was painting the scenic artists on the set of Eat, Pray, Love, which happened to have been the movie that my partner was working on at the time, that I went and I worked on the set with her. So I just started kind of riffing on what I remembered in that set. So it was like looking at the scene in the Lorraine painting and recalling through, of course, this well, what would you call it? It's like it's sort of like the Tower of Babel, right? There's the original language, and as it starts to get reinterpreted from body to body, it starts to turn into some perversion, or it starts to get more like that particular body that's consuming it. So it's like consuming food in a way, right? So as I'm consuming the Lorraine, I'm spitting out the crew of Eat, Pray, Love. I don't know. I don't know how to explain that any other way, but that's where these figures came from. And the sheep were kind of in the Lorraine, but that's the story of this painting and the story of some of the ways in which I arrived at being able to paint even in a way this kind of ludicrous, what looks like antiquated methodology. Does anybody have any questions? Do you want me to sing more? Really?
So one session, how long, you said?
Yes.
How long?
Well, so one session meaning that the medium, I slowed down the drawing, so I had 2 days. I have about a 48-hour window. So I could get a night's sleep in between. So I used poppy seed oil in the medium to slow it. And then I tripped. No. And then, so I love touching it. It looks so clean. What did you guys do? Yeah. So the initial glaze probably happened in a 6-hour session, and then the next day I came in and worked on it for another 10, 12 hours. And there was a big destructive process that happened, very much like a big Giacometti-like erasure, because it was really stupid. Like, it was super literal. Like, it was just like dome cloud and whatever, and I almost jumped ship and converted it. And I do this thing where I start out a lot of time with an exterior, and if the painting goes to not embarrassing territory, I like embarrassing myself, obviously, but it was going to just like not, it was just going to a place where I was getting really, what's the word, like just not methodical, but just very predictable in the moves I was making. And so it's formulaic, right? It was becoming, I could predict what was gonna happen, and then I instantly get bored with that. I think I said earlier that would be like if you were in production that way and you could predict from beginning to end what was happened, then yeah, you might as well just make cardboard boxes. And there are a lot of people that do that in the art, but for me in painting, I have too much, as you can see, I have too much urgency for the medium of painting and what that means. So I appreciate that work. I love it. I love Warhol, but I can't do that for myself. I have other sets of neurosis and anxiety that need to be fulfilled. Those are not it. So that initial stage happened, and then it was really cheesy, and it was getting really literal. And there was a big erasure, and a lot of times when I do that, sometimes I might convert an exterior to an interior, or I might change images entirely. But I actually, through the erasure, opened up a lot this painting and stuck with it. Sir?
You talked about possibly converting it into something else. What would you have converted it into? And if you had, did you later create that painting?
I did, actually. I mean, I never work in the same ground color. Every time I do start paintings with grounds, so like this luminous yellow is definitely the ground. That's your like constable ground or whatever. But I have a rule when a painting goes, I used to call it New Jersey, that's wrong, I'm from Brooklyn. When the painting crosses over to Chris Christie land, no, then oops, no, Chris has been great this week with the crisis. I have a rule to where if the exterior isn't working, I convert it into an interior, and then I shift gears entirely. And then it just kind of like, I pick another image and whatever. So the image that this almost shifted to, I did the inverse to, which is I started this exterior. It was another Lorraine cover, one of those, really the port scene, a little more like one of those Carpaccio port scene, like Lorraine's. And I forget the exact title of it, but you know, the boats and the buildings and the perspective. And I started that painting and I was like, okay, this is Disney and it's too ironic. It's not that because I talked about this earlier with the students, like I tend to start with an impulse of romance, like a kind of romantic image, like, so like not just the image, but the impetus for the painting being something like beautiful and meaningful to me, and I'm not appropriating these things to take them down, right? I'm taking them somewhere else. But then then there's always going to be a turn of irony, and it goes to that place of me and the outside of the canon and my purposes for doing these things, which are different. And then so also just the importance of skepticism around representation. So the irony turns, but then it has to go back to the sweetness in the end for me. So actually some tenderness and some element of like real human feeling and a real kind of experiential thing with the surface has to end up. So when that piece, which was a 11-foot painting of blue, was going into that pure irony space, I didn't want to stay there. So I converted it to an interior that I was thinking of for this, which was the Ecstasy of Saint Jerome by Carpaccio. So it went to, so that big blue one, which was painted in like Disney cobalt blue, became the interior to a Carpaccio painting. And it ended up being DJ St. Augustine was that painting. And if I had an image of it, I could show it to you. But so he's spinning records instead of reading Bibles. I think it's a nice option.
Mm-hmm. Send it to us. There's a committee of people who look at a group of works, and then the woman who we had a major monographic survey for last year, Lois thoughts on it.
Oh, that's cool.
And so I think there was some understanding of your connection to the city and the place that this might have in our collection. What did you have to do with that, if anything? Like, how did they?
I didn't do anything. Yeah, it was at CRG, and it was in, they had opened their new space that flooded this week. That was on the cover of the Times. So they had worked for years to have a ground floor space in Chelsea that then they had all last year, and then they had my show in September, and then last week, obviously. So it's very heartbreaking. There's been a lot of loss. So it's very upsetting. So they put the show in their inaugural exhibition for the 2010 season, 2010, yeah. And then somebody nominated me for the Academy, and I actually don't know who that was. So that was a nomination process, and then it was in the show, and then they bought it with the Purchase Award. So it was, I just, my gallery just had the painting, and yeah, it's like, yeah, who did I do know those people, they're lovely, but now, yeah.
What has it been like in your career? Is it block by block, or do you just sort of like do things like happen?
I just work in my studio. I mean, I'm really not, like, I love talking about my work, obviously. I mean, I'm like teeter-tottering towards you, like I'm so energetic about it. And it's not just because I'm nervous, it's like as a young kid growing up, like it was a vehicle for me to be like all the things I aspired to be, which probably is based on some Joan Crawford movie. But anyways, and so learning how to do this, which I wasn't always so good at it, was just really hard work, and I just worked. Like I don't really, like, I don't go up to curators and collectors and critics and network, like I make my work and I surround myself with people that I really like, and it just turns out to be that the people I really like are really good artists, and then just by word of mouth. And then, you know, it's like CRG was some of the first people I met in New York, and I mean, I don't want to say I was sleeping my way to the top, but I was dating someone that was in their program, and they knew me for years, and they were aware of my work. But I went to actually the Fine Arts Work Center in Provincetown after graduate school for 2 years. And it was, I don't know if anybody knows this place, a lot of you are. Yeah. Yeah, it's 7 months in Provincetown, and you get a free house, a free studio, and money. And it was after Tyler, so I spent 5 years out between undergrad and graduate school, and then I spent 4 years in New York City. And man, do I have some stories. I mean, there was one day that I worked at Citibank all day as a temp. And, you know, literally, I saw Sandy Weil leave the building and Bob Rubin come in, you know. And then later that week, I was a caterer. I was a cook for years, and I cooked dinner for Bill Clinton on the night that the Lewinsky papers were released at some Democratic fundraiser. You know, in New York, I was just like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I gotta make some money and pay my rent, you know? And it's like pretty crazy. And, you know, and New York is great like that. Like, that shit happens like all the time. And so when I got to New York, everything seemed to make sense for me. Also, like, it's very women friendly and just very, and just like anything goes. I mean, it's a little less that way now, but it's still pretty much batshit crazy. People are just wanting things to happen, you know, and it's a wonderful place for that. Anyway, so I worked and I met all these great people, and then I spent those 2 years in Provincetown, and that amount of focus without it being an education situation changed things dramatically for me. Really just, you know, some visiting artists that I met there. I met David Humphrey there. We're really good friends now, and Kate Shepard, and all these amazing artists that I met coming through there. And that really helped, just working. But I'm not very good at the other side of it.
Has Kansas City changed from what we were?
Yeah, it's really great. I'm really happy for the city. It seems really cool. I mean, there's like, first of all, there's really good food to be had. We used to always eat just over here, and that was like the go-to place. But yeah, I mean, I went down to the Bottoms, which I used to go down there with Kelly McLean, who I don't know if you guys know her, but she's an alum of my same year, and she's out in LA, and she's got an amazing career out in LA. And we used to just go down there and drink beer and skim rocks in the river and throw rocks at bottles and just like talk all day long and do paintings down there and stuff like that. And it was just like, I mean, it looked like Breezy Point like 2 days ago, you know, like just an absolute implosion. Like Godzilla had stepped down on the place, you know. It was really great, and I always thought like that'd be really, really cool to be able to do something with all this beautiful post-industrial space, you know. And it's, you know, those galleries down there are great, but also the gas station we ate in, the Guinness place, whatever. That was really, it's really exciting. It's really cool. And I keep saying, like, to my students and to these guys earlier today, like, what I'm really hoping is that the internet will actually become a tool for knowledge, not just a tool for escapism, and that provinciality will be less provincial. Like all these kids know so much more about contemporary art internationally than I could ever have known. I mean, they tried. But you know, it's like hard when you can't just be like, what was that person's name, and then Google them. You know, I mean, so the idea, there are certain monetary problems with that, which is like, how do you make your living, right? And certainly New York has an art market per se, although most artists I know that show still make their livings in multiple ways in New York, including me. I teach. And in truth, I wouldn't want to rely on an art market all the time, because those people are weird. Especially, yeah, the fur coats and the tiny shoes. I get this sense of, yeah, bound feet. I'm not going to specify. You know what I'm talking about. But yeah, I mean, that's the other thing you don't want. All your life in this one little thing that is so nefarious and incestuous and weird. Like, you need to have some options. But if there was a way that, like, you could afford, you know, like healthcare and your rent, and you could just be working away here in a place like this, like, amazing things could happen. And I think it's starting to happen. The problem is God forbid you've got a car accident or something. But it's pretty, it seems pretty spectacular what Bill Brady, who I graduated same year as him, and I used to go into ATM all the time, and I always loved that dude, and I think that he's just doing a great job, and he's bringing work in, and he's showing the work that's here, you know, and there's a way that the art world can be way less centralized. It's kind of like the agro business, you know. You don't want all the cows that people eat in like 300 miles in Southern California, you know. You want them all over the country, because everybody's coming from different provincial interests. So, right, Ann Harris? I'm really glad I have this.